Tonight, the UK says it will recognise a Palestinian state within weeks unless Israel ends what it calls the appalling situation in Gaza. The Prime Minister makes the announcement after weeks of pressure from his own backbenchers and from within his cabinet. Foreign Secretary David Lammy tells the United Nations conference in New York the decision has been taken with a hand of history on its shoulder. Also tonight, an extraordinary row breaks out after the Science Secretary Peter Kyle says Nigel Farage is on the side of Jimmy Savile. It's been sparked by new age verification laws online, which have just come into force. Former Technology Secretary Michelle Donnellan will join us live. She was one of the ministers who helped bring these new laws in, and I'll be asking her whether they are now affecting freedom of speech. Plus, we'll have a special report from our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, an exclusive insight into the cheap Chinese imports flown into the UK without any tariffs being paid. And she joins us live on last night's show. Tonight, we're going to take a look at the Lioness manager Serena Biegman's special surprise as England's women celebrated their triumph. Stepping out with us tonight, Nadeem Zahawi and Dawn Butler, who'll be with us for the next hour. It's Tuesday, I'm Sophy Ridge live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening. Well, we are starting tonight with the big breaking story. The UK has announced it will recognise the state of Palestine from September unless Israel takes what it's describing as substantive steps to end the suffering in Gaza. It was announced with a coordinated piece of diplomatic theatre. First, the Prime Minister held an emergency meeting of his cabinet where he confirmed the decision before a camera was then called into Downing Street for him to make a statement.
Our goal remains a safe and secure Israel alongside a viable and sovereign Palestinian state. But right now, that goal is under pressure like never before. I've always said that we will recognise a Palestinian state as a contribution to a proper peace process at the moment of maximum impact for the two-state solution. With that solution now under threat, this is the moment to act. So today, as part of this process towards peace, I can confirm the UK will recognise the state of Palestine by the United Nations General Assembly in September, unless the Israeli government takes substantive steps to end the appalling situation in Gaza, agree to a ceasefire, and commit to a long-term sustainable peace, reviving the prospect of a two-state solution. And this includes allowing the UN to restart the supply of aid and making clear that there will be no annexations in the West Bank. Meanwhile, our message to the terrorists of Hamas is unchanged and unequivocal. They must immediately release all of the hostages, sign up to a ceasefire, disarm, and accept that they will play no part in the government of Gaza. And we'll make an assessment in September on how far the parties have met these steps. But no one should have a veto over our decision.
Well, the Foreign Secretary David Lammy had dialed into that cabinet call, and he then made a statement at the United Nations in New York where he talked about how the UK bears a special burden of responsibility to support a two-state solution. As you'll hear now, there was a moment of applause in the room as he confirmed the UK's signal about changing its position.
It is with the hand of history on our shoulders that His Majesty's government therefore intends to recognise the state of Palestine when the UN General Assembly gathers in September here in New York. Friends, we will do this unless the Israeli government acts to end the appalling situation in Gaza, ends its military campaign, and commits to a long, sustainable peace based on a two-state solution. Our demands on Hamas also remain absolute and unwavering.
So that was David Lammy and Keir Starmer. And in the last hour, we've also had a response from the Israeli Foreign Ministry. They've said Israel rejects the statement by the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. The shift in the British government's position at this time, following the French move and internal political pressures, constitutes a reward for Hamas and harms efforts to achieve a ceasefire in Gaza and a framework for the release of hostages. And also in the last few minutes, we've also heard from the leader of the opposition, that's the Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch. She posted about the decision saying this: "It's disgraceful that Keir Starmer recalled his cabinet to try and sort out a political problem for the Labour Party. Recognising a Palestinian state won't bring the hostages home, it won't end the war, and it won't get aid into Gaza. This is political posturing at its very worst." Well, one of the many questions that arose after today's announcement was whether or not the US President Donald Trump had been informed about it yesterday when he met with Keir Starmer in Scotland. And in the last few minutes, we have heard from Mr Trump, who was travelling back to the US on Air Force One, where he appears to have suggested that the pair never actually discussed the UK decision. What is clear is that the horrific images emerging from Gaza and, of course, the intensifying warnings of famine have led to mounting pressure on the Prime Minister from MPs and also from within his own cabinet. We can talk now, I think, to our chief political correspondent, John Craig, who joins us from Downing Street. John, what do you make of the Prime Minister's announcement?
Well, he's clearly bowed to pressure on a number of fronts, really, because he has bowed to the pressure from those 250 or so MPs, most of whom were Labour, who were calling for this recognition to come actually at the conference this week where David Lammy has been speaking. So we've already heard from, in the last few minutes, from Sarah Champion. She's the MP who wrote the letter, chairs the International Development Committee, all-party committee, and she's delighted, as you might expect, although she's a bit concerned about those conditions, 4 of them. The 4 conditions are, just to summarise them briefly, 1, the end the appalling situation in Gaza, 2, a ceasefire, 3, no annexation in the West Bank, and 4, a long-term peace process that delivers a two-state solution. Well, we've heard how hostile the Israeli reaction is, so it's not doesn't bode too well for that happening. Now, from political opponents, yes, political posturing, says Kemi Badenoch. Appeasing his backbenchers, says Priti Patel, the Shadow Foreign Secretary. Now, from Sir Ed Davey, who signed that Sarah Champion letter, along with plenty of others, he says it's a good thing, but he's worried that it's being used as a bargaining chip. Yes, he's probably right about that. It does look that way. Now, the other pressure, of course, came from inside the Cabinet. The Prime Minister referred, when he was speaking to journalists this afternoon, about the Cabinet meeting. It's reported, it's estimated, that at least 7 Cabinet Ministers, including big hitters like the Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, and indeed the Foreign Secretary, were calling for this move. Then, of course, there was the pressure from Emmanuel Macron at the weekend, and he said that his country would recognise it at the General Assembly in September in New York, UN General Assembly. But it is significant that President Trump, who seemed to be getting on so well with the Prime Minister up in Scotland, when he was asked, did the PM discuss it with you? We never did discuss it, he told reporters on Air Force One. Well, clearly we know from the Prime Minister that he did discuss the appalling aid situation in Gaza, and the Prime Minister seems to have had success in persuading President Trump to put pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu. I asked the Prime Minister, did you get reassurances on that? He wouldn't answer that. He said they were private talks. But we know that yesterday President Trump was talking about the terrible TV pictures, saying you can't fake that, and also said you've got to get every ounce of food in. So clearly he had some success with the president on the aid situation, but it appears that he didn't tell him about his political bombshell about recognising the state of Palestine. Now, the Prime Minister did call Benjamin Netanyahu today to tell him. He's also spoken to the King of Jordan. He's due to make more phone calls to try and sell this package. But politically, well, back home amongst his political opponents, it's gone down badly. He's pleased Labour MPs, and the suspicion is that it looks a bit more like party management. I mean, he's got a lot of form for U-turns when he's under pressure from his backbenchers, and given the reaction from Sarah Champion, it looks as though this does look like a piece of party management, albeit a move, as the Prime Minister was stressing, to try and get the aid into Gaza and end what he talked about, what he called the appalling pictures and the appalling famine and suffering that there is there. So, not a great reception for domestically or indeed in the Middle East, but any politician will tell you can't please everyone in the Middle East.
John, thank you very much indeed. John Craig there from a very noisy Downing Street. Well, joining us now is someone who personally knows all too well the crisis in Gaza. We can speak to the former Scottish First Minister, Humza Yousaf, who's live from Dundee for us. Thanks for being on the programme. So the Prime Minister saying that the UK will recognise a Palestinian state in September unless Israel takes substantive steps to end the situation in Gaza. Do you welcome the move?
Well, first, let's be clear that Palestinian statehood is the inalienable right of the Palestinian people. It shouldn't be dependent on conditions, especially conditions that have to be met by the occupying force. Let's not forget Israel, by international laws, of course, recognised as the occupying step. So to answer your question, it's a step in the right direction, but it should have been made, of course, as an irreversible statement, an unequivocal statement of recognition of Palestinian statehood. I don't, in truth, Sophie, completely understand the logic either, that as a Gazan or Palestinian, you're only worthy of recognition of your existence as a state if bombs continue to fall on your head, if your children continue to get killed, if you continue to get massacred. If that stops, then actually you're no longer worthy of recognition of statehood. That, to me, the logic of that, I have to say, it does not make much sense to me. So I would have rather that the statement came forward as an unequivocal, irreversible recognition of the Palestinians' inalienable right to statehood, and was then accompanied by meaningful economic and trade sanctions, as well as an announcement of a full arms embargo.
I just want to put to you the statement that we've had from the Israeli government, because they've said this evening that this move, in their words, constitutes a reward for Hamas and harms efforts to achieve a ceasefire in Gaza and a framework for the release of hostages. So in other words, they're kind of rewarding Hamas, sending a signal that, I guess, terrorism, like we saw on October the 7th, works. What would you say to that argument?
Well, I'll say a few things. First and foremost, I think when you read out a statement from the Israeli government, it would be helpful to say that this is the Israeli government that is led by a man that's wanted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes, including using starvation as a weapon of war, as we can see from the images emanating from Gaza. That's the first thing. So I don't think we should see the Israeli government as a kind of credible source on these matters. Nonetheless, I know, of course, you have to read out their statement. Second thing I would say is a little bit of history here. In 1948, of course, Israel itself was founded when Zionist militias took part in some of the worst terrorist atrocities that UK armed forces have ever faced, and UK troops have faced. We know, for example, the terrible terror incident, an attack at the King David Hotel. And the third thing I would say is, by suggesting that this is a reward for Hamas, it is therefore collective punishment, suggesting that almost 2 million people in Gaza, and of course all of those millions in the West Bank, are all somehow Hamas, are all responsible for the terrible atrocities which, of course, many of us, in fact, every reasonable person condemns, that they are somehow responsible for that, which they are not.
Can I talk to you about the situation in Gaza? Because I know, of course, you have relatives, your wife's family who are there. If I may, you know, what are they experiencing?
It's impossible for me to put it into words. Yesterday we received some very sad news that my father-in-law's cousin, who's only a few years older than me, has 2 children, was killed by the Israeli forces trying to get flour His family begged him not to go to get food, but he couldn't bear to see his family starving. So he went to get flour, Mahmoud. He's not Hamas, so I have to say that. He's not a terrorist, never taken part in any armed struggle. Went out to get flour for his family, was shot in the stomach, and then a tank ran over him. And my father-in-law, I spoke to yesterday to give him my condolences, inconsolable with grief. And then Nadia's cousin, Sally, who we've spoken about before, has 4 children who are becoming emaciated in her arms. And I don't have the words to describe it. I mean, I'm a father of 3 beautiful girls. And, I feel helpless, choked with really pain when I think if they're in pain. How can we possibly imagine what a Gazan mother or father must be going through when they themselves are starving, watching their children become skeletons in their own arms and being able to do nothing about it? And I think, look, ultimately, you and I will discuss the geopolitics because that is important to do. But what we ask people, what we plead with people to do, is just think about this as a father, a mother, or just a human being. And surely we must do everything we can in our gift to stop this atrocity from continuing. And that's why, I plead with the Prime Minister, I use that word, I plead with the Prime Minister to take meaningful action, sanctions, end all arms sales to Israel, not for necessarily geopolitical reasons, but because I want to see an end to the inhumanity that we're witnessing.
I'm sorry about the situation that, people that you love are facing, and I know how difficult it must be to talk about this. So I just want to say, thank you for coming on and for telling their stories and for telling us what they're experiencing. I mean, how hard are they finding it to get food?
Well, look, I'm grateful for your concern, and the reason why we must speak out, as you know only too well, of course, international journalists are barred from going to Gaza. They're not allowed to report what's going on. This brave Palestinian journalists, which it seems to me one by one are being massacred and gunned down. But we have to speak up, because if we're not speaking up and speaking out, then of course the truth will remain hidden. Look, how difficult is it to find food? Again, if I gave you the example of Nadia's cousin, Sally, she couldn't find leaves and grass to eat. This is 2025, and people are looking for grass and leaves to eat. She had one kind of loaf of bread or packet of bread, flat bread, and she was trying to make that last the entire week. So 6 of them in the family, 4 children, her and her husband. And that is the situation. There is it is beyond comprehension. And I think that's why it's incumbent on every single one of us, whatever our platform is, whatever our position is, to speak up, speak out, and demand action is taken, because history will judge all of us and ask, I'm sure our future generations ask, how on earth did you let this happen? And I think it's incumbent on all of us to do everything we can in our power to stop it.
Thank you so much for coming on the programme, for sharing the story. The people that you know who are in Gaza, it really is shocking to hear, so thank you.
Thank you.
Well, let's bring in our duo for tonight, shall we? The former senior Conservative Cabinet Minister, Nadhim Zahawi, and the Labour MP for Brent East, Dawn Butler. It's great to have you both on the programme. And, I think hearing the experience of people in Gaza, it's a very difficult thing to come off the back and to talk about the politics, because, all of our hearts kind of goes out to the people who are just caught up in this appalling conflict. Dawn, do you feel more optimistic after today? Do you think the Prime Minister's done the right thing?
I agree with everything that Hamza just said. It was such an realistic and emotional testimony that he just gave from lived experience within his whole family. And I think the key thing that I always try to hold on to is the humanity. Where is our humanity in all of this? And I think he's right. When the history books are written, they're going to say who spoke up, who spoke out. And I think the announcement today was and is an important announcement, even though it's somewhat confusing, because I was on a MP's briefing and we were told it isn't conditional. So I just wonder in the next few days whether it's clumsy, speech writing.
That's interesting.
That's
So
made it sound
you were told on
conditional.
a briefing for Labour MPs that it wasn't conditional, and that does seem to have changed now because it's saying this will happen if Israel doesn't end the...
I wonder just if tomorrow, whether that's going to be clarified. I do think it's an important step, but it's an important step for us to discuss peace and to discuss aid. I mean, how I find this whole conversation so dehumanising is that people are talking about, well, they've got some aid or people are stealing some aid. Israel is an occupying force and they're used to sending 500 to 700 trucks a day. Now, the most trucks that have been sent in is about 100 trucks. So of course they're withholding food. There's no doubt, nobody can doubt that they are withholding food. That means that you are starving a population. How can we sit back and watch another country starve another country? It's inhumane.
Nadine, what's your take on this?
I worry. I worry that if this is a sort of cynical party management move by Keir Starmer, it will bring more harm to the Palestinian people. The Palestinian people deserve a better outcome. They're being held hostage by Hamas. Hamas is desperate to survive. They know that any chink in weakness will allow them to survive and hijack their own people. What I'd like to see, genuinely, is if Keir is serious about this, is he talking to some of our allies in the region? You look at the UAE, for example, second biggest aid delivery to Gaza after the US. Are we talking to Palestinian leaders like Mohammed Dahlan, who defeated Hamas, one of the few, I think the only, in Khan Yunis, to defeat them in that one election they ever had, and then they started throwing their Palestinian colleagues off buildings, the PLO, to get rid of the Palestinian Authority from Gaza. My worry is if this is just party management, it'll just do more harm to the Palestinian people than do good. What we need to do...
What do you mean by party management? Because this is offensive.
I don't know. I'm just saying I don't know
but this
why
is really important, because if you think party management is ensuring that Palestine's recognised, ensuring that people are fed, ensuring that we save children, then let it be party management. I think it's terribly offensive to even say something like that.
Well, I tell you what.
Because I tell you, the majority of people in the UK and globally around the world want to see peace.
Yes.
And we have
but
to
you want to see a viable
outcome.
You want to see a viable... Look,
and how's that going to happen without a two-state solution?
No, of course we have to have a two-state solution.
So why say
Hamza said, and I agree with him, the Palestinian people have an inalienable right to a state. What I'm saying is, all this rhetoric, party management, words, will not deliver it for them, right? If he's serious... Let's use our convening power. Let's bring people... Are we talking to Mohammed Dahlan, who defeated Hamas? Are we talking to people who want to come in and manage Gaza, Palestinians, right, instead of Hamas? Hamas have hijacked the Palestinian people. What we mustn't do, in my view, I think it would be criminal, and yes, we'll all be judged by this, is to play into Hamas's hands. Because if they survive, they continue to hijack the Palestinian people.
Isn't playing into Hamas's hand. Recognising Palestine...
Does it deliver on the ground?
Is saving...
Does it deliver on the ground is my question. You and I, Starmer can stand at a lectern and say all this stuff. Does it actually deliver on the ground?
Recognising Palestine is ensuring that there is a Palestine to be recognised before it gets destroyed.
Yes.
And also saving the innocent civilians who are currently being used as a weapon of war. That is what it's doing.
I don't disagree with you. All I'm saying is there a serious plan? Are we talking to our allies in the region saying, what happens the day after?
OK,
right.
so then that's fair. Talk about the plan is fair, but don't talk about party management.
I know, I worry. I just said, you heard one thing in your briefing as MPs, right? It looks like Keir is standing in the middle of the street, and as I think Margaret Thatcher once said, if you stand in the middle of the street, you get run over, right? He doesn't know which way to turn. He's under pressure from Labour members, hasn't really thought through what happens next on the ground in Gaza.
You think hundreds of thousands of people that march on the streets... Oh, I mean, I wish they were all Labour members, but they're not. This is more than that. We shouldn't play party politics in this way. I think it's distasteful.
I'm doing the opposite. I'm actually saying, let's actually use our convening power. Let's pull our allies together. Let's think through what does the day after happen. Have we actually has Keir said to Hamas, you have to disarm? I heard him speak just now about it. I'm glad he said it in his speech. But are we doing something on the ground to pressure Hamas to disarm and to leave Gaza, to let Palestinians
It's a fair point to ask for the details. It's a fair
Yes.
point to ask for the details, and that, I think, will have to come out over the next couple of days. It's a fair point to ask for what the process to peace is going to look like.
Yes.
And we have to talk about peace, because at the moment you have people who are only focused on talking about war. And we have to talk about peace, and we have to also talk about the humanitarian side of it.
But the worst of all worlds,
the innocent
the worst of all worlds
Palestinian people.
worst of all worlds is we allow Hamas to survive and continue to actually hold their own people, the Palestinian people, hostage. That is, I think, a terrible indictment on politicians around the world. We have to have a lasting peace and
I agree.
a sustainable Palestinian state.
Yes, it has to be sustainable, and there needs to be land returned. There needs to be the hostage returned. There needs to be people who've been held captive in Israel prisons without charge returned. We need to stop the settlers. There's a lot that needs to be done, and I agree. The details will need to come out.
Look, it's clear the passion's here, and I think what that shows is just how we all feel kind of helpless, and everyone wants the same thing in the end somehow, but it is just such a battle.
But it is a confusing message tonight from Keir. I mean, and I think he's going to have to clear it up very quickly.
Well, we'll see. Thank you both very much indeed. It's been great to hear your views on this. And, of course, the announcement by the Prime Minister on potentially recognising a Palestinian state and the situation in Gaza as well are sure to feature in tomorrow's papers. We'll have our extended press preview from 10:30 this evening with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining us will be the political journalist Theo Usherwood and the journalist and broadcaster Sonia Soda. Now to the UK, because the Online Safety Act has come into force, which means you need to verify how old you are before accessing certain websites. The idea is to protect children from online harm like pornography and suicide websites, but critics say it's curbing free speech online. So, look, the debate over the Act itself is raging, but I just want to make one point on the pure politics of this, because today has really underlined how, in the digital age, Reform know how to maximise their message. It all started with this moment on Sky News.
We have people out there who are extreme pornographers, peddling hate, peddling violence. Nigel Farage is on their side. Make no mistake about it, if people like Jimmy Savile were alive today, he'll be perpetrating his crimes online. And Nigel Farage is saying that he's on their side.
Now, look, Reform weren't happy about that, and they quickly went all in.
To use that allegation against Nigel is one of the most appalling and disgusting things I've seen in the political arena in my lifetime, and I think it's upon him to apologise.
So that was the first response. But then look at this. So this was just a couple of hours after the Peter Kyle interview. Then this happened.
Good morning and welcome to our first broadcast coming direct from Reform UK's new headquarters here in Westminster. I just wish I was in a better mood, because I'm not.
So look, Reform basically set up their own interview in their own media room at what they call Reform HQ, and then very quickly got the clips out on social media. I mean, look, this is a slick operation. They know their audience, and they also know how to get to their audience. Just check out the press conference they did yesterday, again, from their own kind of media room.
Before I introduce Colin Sutton to you, here's a short video just to remind people of his history and his background.
Crime is going unchecked all over the place, all over the country. I'm Colin Sutton. I was a police officer for 30 years.
So look, there's a lot of questions to be asked about the professionalism of Reform, the vetting of candidates, their policy detail. But when it comes to their comms, and particularly their digital comms, I mean, you can understand why the traditional parties are worried. Our political correspondent Rob Powell has this report on the Online Safety Act.
How to keep children safe online. A question of policy, but one of politics too. After Reform UK leader Nigel Farage said he would repeal new online safety rules because of concerns about free speech. This cabinet minister hitting back on Sky News with this extraordinary accusation.
If people like Jimmy Savile were alive today, he'll be perpetrating his crimes online. and Nigel Farage is saying that he's on their side.
I'm sorry.
Not the side of children who are...
I'm going to ask you to clarify. Do you honestly think to say Nigel Farage is on Jimmy Savile's side?
When it comes to online activity, we have seen unfettered access of adults to children via social media.
Speaking on Monday, Reform branded the Online Safety Act a massive overreach that could silence criticism of the government.
So, Mr Kyle, can I have an apology, please?
Nigel Farage not shirking the fight.
Just how low can the Labour government sink in its desperation? Yes, of course, they're in trouble. They're well behind us in the opinion polls. But frankly, to say that I would do anything that would in any way aid and abet people like Jimmy Savile is frankly it's so below the belt, it's almost not true.
So why are these two raising the political temperature? I'm told this was no slip of the tongue by Peter Kyle. Rather, ministers feel Reform has made a misjudgment by pledging to scrap these safety laws, given huge concern about what children are viewing online. But Nigel Farage relishes public spats like this, and he'll try to use it to sow distrust in the government and mainstream politics in general. But what do experts think? First, civil liberties group Big Brother Watch.
The main concerns at the moment are that it is limiting adult access to legal content, but that it's also putting children at risk by providing incentives for them to seek VPNs and anonymous browsers while seeking a lot of information and content that we might find distasteful and oftentimes harmful, but that actually can be helpful in the right kinds of context.
But children's groups say it's a price worth paying.
There's a huge amount in this act that can make a real difference for children. In particular, we should really see a change from companies in how content is being moderated, making sure that children aren't being served harmful material through algorithms and that they're able to have safer and more private experiences.
Upping safety online, something few disagree with, but getting there a technical challenge with political tension. Rob Powell, Sky News in Westminster.
Well, for more on this, we're joined now by our science and technology reporter, Mickey Carroll. Mickey, I'm interested in your take on all of this, because, look, I kind of understand the perspective that the internet is a Wild West and that kids can access everything, and we've got a whole generation growing up, watching porn way, way earlier than we'd like. But what's your take on the kind of implementation of this? Is it working?
I think this all boils down to, really, it's really hard to regulate the internet. So when you ask, is it working? It's working maybe as well as we could have expected it to. I mean, there has been this huge backlash already. We've had 400,000 people sign a petition asking the government to repeal the Act. We've had accusations of censorship from adults saying they can no longer access legal content. But ultimately, you've got social media companies who have kind of hundreds of hours of footage being uploaded every minute, and they were always going to have to use blunt tools to try and regulate what's going online. So, yeah, I think it's maybe this is always what we were expecting. And in the run-up to these codes being enforced, all of these arguments that we're hearing now were already worries. Nothing's really changed since then. People were worried about freedom of speech. People were worried about privacy. I mean, when you kind of sign into a lot of these age verification systems, you have to upload either an ID or a selfie, and people are worried about their data there. But equally, something had to be done. There's data out there that suggests that a quarter of suicides in young people is because of things they've seen online. And so either it was going to be this, or maybe it was going to be an Australia-style model where under 16s are completely banned from social media. So it's maybe not surprising that we're seeing this huge backlash, but also it did feel like there had to be something put in place.
Mickey, stay here if you can, because I'm going to try and bring you into the kind of wider debate in a little bit. But just in the meantime, we are joined now by the former Science and Technology Secretary Michelle Donnellan, along with Jim Killick, who's the Executive Director of Open Rights Group. We've also got a panel here, of course, and Nadeem Zahawi and Dawn Butler here to give their views on all sorts of things about the programme. But just to Michelle first, because, look, you were involved in this being set up. What do you make of the implementation? Has it kind of gone as well as you would have expected?
Yeah, first of all, I think it's really important to say that we completely rewrote this piece of legislation because of these concerns. So we scrapped something called legal but harmful that would have resulted in adults having their free speech curtailed. But actually, I disagree on this point that the implementation woes were inevitable, because that is literally the job of this government. They have had over a year now to deal with this. They have a regulator that's been paid for a number of years to set up for this and has a huge team dedicated to this. And we put protections in the bill to ensure that these things don't happen. So obviously tech was always going to jump to the easiest, the quickest solutions. And it's the job of the regulator to say, no, you've got to be investing in the technology so that you're not doing these blanket bans, you're not restricting speech. The clauses in that bill that are put in there, such as proportionality, that therefore means that they can't just ban stuff. There's also protections around making sure that they do enforce their terms of service. So again, they can't just remove content that they feel like. That was never in place before. So in many ways, free speech is protected. And one of the things that I made sure was in that bill was a specific clause for free speech. So I think there's a lot of confusion over what the bill actually does and what it doesn't do. And at the same time, we've got a government that doesn't really understand or believe in free speech. So it's not in their interest or their beliefs to actually enforce it. And we've seen that on a number of different things. If we look at the higher education free speech bill that they wanted to scrap, that they've watered down. If you look at the so-called Banters bill, this is not a government that believes in free speech. It's no wonder that they've let the regulator get off scot-free and they're not really focused on it. And today you've got Peter Kyle throwing stones at Farage in a disgraceful manner when he should be getting on and dealing with this detail.
OK, well, let's bring in Jim Killick, shall we? Because you were talking there about the free speech points, and I'm interested to get your view on this. Do you think that it's just the implementation, or do you think that there was always going to be these free speech concerns, this kind of blanket rulings when this Act came in? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm afraid the Act was inevitably going to cause these problems given how it was drafted. I completely agree that this could be done in a way that didn't impact free speech in the way that it has, but it is the Act itself that has cause these problems. To give you a couple of examples, there is no kind of threshold at which the duties start. So any website at all, even with 6 users, has to go through all of the impact assessments, all the kind of checks to whether the risks might occur, hours and hours of work, all of that. In order to comply with the law. And the result is that a lot of sites in Europe and the US have just switched off the UK because they think, well, I'm getting these letters from Ofcom saying I need to comply. I've got no idea how to do all of this. And frankly, our site is too small to be bothered. So they're shutting the UK off. And then there's another group of websites which were running in the UK who couldn't just switch off UK users, so they closed down entirely. So those sort of things were the inevitable thing of not having a basic threshold there. There's also this question of knowing who is a child and who isn't, and then deciding what kind of content is risky or not. And while the Act didn't say, well, you have to age verify everybody, a lot of services said, well, how on earth are we going to know who's a child and who's an adult if we don't age verify them? So they've done that. So, there are, I could go on, there are lots of other areas where, there are free speech problems. But the other big problem, I think, is that adults don't want to engage with the age verification tools because they look risky. And frankly, they are. I mean, you go and look at their terms and conditions. Most of them are based in the States. Some of them say we're going to keep your data for 3 years. Others say we're going to use their data, for AI training and business purposes and all kinds of things that you really wouldn't want them to be doing. And so people don't want to use age verification. So if the choice is, in order to see on X or Blue Sky content which might show violence like Palestine or things and so on, then they don't want to do it. So yeah, I'm afraid this is just the design of the Act. It could have been designed better. It wasn't.
Let's go back to Michelle at this point there, because Jim is saying that actually it's inevitable, because of the Act itself, that this is going to happen. And I guess you could make the argument that that is worth it if you're protecting children from suicidal websites, for example. But what do you say to this, that actually this was always going to happen if this kind of legislation was introduced?
So I think it depends on what you're talking about was always going to happen. So if we pick up on some of the things that were discussed there around potentially having age verification as well as age estimation, The alternative is letting 6 and 7-year-olds onto social media and seeing awful things that leads to horrendous instances with some children taking their own lives. Now, that isn't fiction, that has actually happened. It is very difficult for parents, and children are literally 2 clicks away from adulthood at the moment. And we live in this world. We have to be realistic. This is an area that's not been regulated. We need to make sure that our laws are keeping pace. And burying our heads in the sand and letting our children experience this heinous content is not okay in modern Britain, and it's not okay anywhere in the world. That's why we produced this piece of legislation that is comprehensive, does protect free speech as well. But of course, it's not going to protect free speech if the implementation isn't right, or you've got a regulator that isn't held to account. Now, that's what the government need to be doing and focusing on, and making sure that tech is investing in the very best technology. And this is an iterative process. It is a new venture. It is always going to have teething problems. But that said, we shouldn't be settling for limitations of free speech on adults. And some of the instances that we've seen in the last few days are not okay. And that's what needs ironing out.
It's been really, really interesting to have this debate so far, because there clearly is just an awful lot to get stuck into here and to kind of grapple with. I'm keen to bring you guys in on this as well. Nadine, where's your head at on it?
Yeah, look, I was... Michelle Donlan worked for me in the Department of Education. I was sort of deeply involved in the legislation. And I think 2 things. One, I think Nigel's making a mistake. I think parents want to see... Nigel Farage is making a mistake. Parents want to see online child protection in place. So I think, I'm sure all the pollsters will be doing polls by the weekend to demonstrate that he's wrong on this. But I do think Labour have made a terrible error of judgment, forgive me, Dawn, with what Peter Kyle said about Nigel, because it is actually abhorrent to say and to link him to someone as awful and as criminal as Jimmy Savile. You're playing into their hands, and they've done it brilliantly, because what they're going to do is say, look, this government's instinct is to come down hard on free speech, look at what they're doing with some of the protests, look at how people who might put something on Twitter get a jail term versus the organised rape gangs not having a full inquiry backed by this government, the Pakistani rape gangs. They'll play all these cards into politics, and I think Peter Kyle would have been smart to either rephrase or very quickly change. And I think Number 10 made a mistake by doubling down on it, by backing Peter Kyle on this, because you're playing into Nigel's hands on that. You're on his turf. And I think Dawn's silence speaks volumes.
No, I'm silent because...
You're not usually...
She's listening. Yeah, I am. I'm listening.
I know Dawn well. They're our friends.
I'm listening, but I'm also silent because... the average age of young boys accessing porn used to be 14, now it is 11. As Nikki said, is it a quarter of young people commit suicide because of what they've seen online? Now, I know that Peter Kyle has had meetings after meetings after meetings with parents who have lost their children because of something they saw online. And whether it be bullying, suicide sites, eating disorder sites. And, these sites do not age verify. And they do not age verify for a reason, because that is their business model. So forcing them to age verify is really important. And yes, some other people might get caught up with that. But then that's how legislation works. Yeah. Sometimes you have some unintended consequences from legislation. You will look at it and you will amend it. But ultimately, where we're starting from is saving children, making sure they can have a childhood. There's stuff that we won't understand as adults, that young people are going through, that we never had to go through. All these clicks and likes. The algorithms are designed to be extremely addictive and also extremely damaging.
Miki, I'm interested on the age verification, because it feels like this is such a big part of it, right? And I'll be honest, I got one of the boxes come up on my phone, and I was like, this doesn't... Originally, I was like, no, this doesn't look right. This looks like some kind of scam, or something. I'm not going to put my details in here. Do you think it's a part of people just getting used to it, or do you think that actually there is a bit of a problem with the data and that people are right to be a bit concerned?
I mean, part of the new rules is around data protection. So if you're looking at it just from what is supposed to be implemented, there shouldn't be a problem there. But ultimately, you've got more companies taking more data. And I mean, I've spent the last 4 months reporting on various hacks, and so people maybe are rightly worried. I think the other problem with these age verification services is we've seen since Friday morning, VPNs shooting up in Apple's App Store ratings.
And these are basically like kind of so people can be like invisible online.
Yeah, you sort of trick websites into saying that you're coming from a different country. And that's become kind of a massive talking point and suggests that children could be kind of pushed towards more harmful websites. But there's also a really real concern that as kids try and bypass these age verification systems, they turn towards the dark web as well. And we saw even by 10 a.m. on Friday morning, the codes came in at midnight, we saw 66,000 extra UK users using the dark web. So that's a very real concern as well.
Before Michelle,
we have to do something. 14 years, the Tory government did nothing. Labour's come in and they're doing something.
We introduced the legislation.
You didn't introduce it.
Michelle had to rewrite it.
You wrote it, but
you have to deliver it. We get more money.
Michelle's
more money.
Michelle's desperate to get back in. I'm going to let Michelle come back in.
Stop it.
I think we need to let the facts speak for themselves. Like, we delivered this piece of legislation. It became law under the Conservative government. So I don't think we shouldn't make stuff up. It is your government that is implementing it, where the issues are being borne out, because you've got a minister that is too busy making absolutely ridiculous accusations that, quite frankly, are outrageous. At a leader of a political party and damning.
That's not actually changed the implementation of the Online Safety Act.
No, what I'm saying is that he should be focusing
on.
What I'm saying, he should be getting on with his job. He should be focusing on actually making sure that the regulator has got their foot on the gas.
I think he is getting on with his job, and he's talking about predators that operate online, and there are a lot of predators online. There's a lot of kids that are being duped online, and this is an attempt to stop that, and we're doing something about it.
But I think Michelle's point is right. Look, we've given more money to the regulator. If we need to revisit how they're regulating, how they're doing this, we want for this to work, right? Ultimately, if we're going to do grown-up politics, we want this to work. The parents watching tonight want it to work, and we want to also secure free speech, right? And it shouldn't be beyond the wit of politicians and regulators to make this work.
Yeah, this isn't stopping free speech.
And also, like you said at the beginning, regulating the internet is tough. It's really hard.
Yeah,
this is why it's taken so long to get to this place, right? And yes, things might not be completely right at the beginning, but that's because it is hard, right? Which I guess doesn't mean.
But it would have been a smarter move by Peter Carl to say that, right? Because people expect, I hope, their politicians to deliver on the hard stuff, as we did, when I was in government on the vaccine programme, which we briefed all MPs about all the time, and they took the message out to their constituents. We need to be able to demonstrate that.
I mean, he's working very hard on this,
But instead he's played into Nigel's arms.
But we don't have to talk about Nigel Farage. That's the problem why he's so, because everybody always talks about him. I don't talk about him. Let's stop talking about him.
He did, and Number 10 doubled down on it.
Irrelevant,
he did, and Number 10 doubled down on it, and they're going to get a bloody nose. Watch what happens next.
OK, really interesting to talk to you all about it. Thank you very much, and thank you, Mickey, as well. It's good to have your perspective on it too. Just a very quick thought from you to finish, Jim. What would you say to? I guess we have had a bit of the panellists around the table saying that look, this is hard, but we've got to protect the children. What would you say?
Look, of course, and it is hard, but it was also very obvious that a lot of this was going to happen. I'm afraid I disagree with Dawn that there aren't free speech impacts. Sites are being closed. Sites are blocking the UK. That's a free expression impact. And that didn't need to happen. And likewise, I don't agree with the comment that data protection is good enough to protect us using these age verification tools. Unfortunately, data protection is actually quite permissive, and our Information Commissioner does more or less nothing to enforce data protection. He didn't even bother to do anything when all that data about Afghanis was lost a couple of weeks ago. Like literally nothing. Said it was too hard. Did nothing. So we need stronger regulation in that place, and that was totally inevitable. And also, the Act, although it says lots of things about free speech, it doesn't actually say how to incentivize the companies to protect it. It will fine them if they don't take stuff down, but it won't do anything if they take too much stuff off. So it's all a bit unbalanced. And I think the reason it's unbalanced is because the conversation has been solely about, understandably, but solely about the harms. And if it was less about, if we had a more balanced kind of debate, I think we would have had legislation much more like they have in Europe, where there are appeals processes and there are guarantees of privacy in the kind of tools of age verification and so on. And unfortunately, that is all missing in the UK.
And Michelle, a final thought from you. I could see you shaking your head a bit there.
A couple of things they just said were untrue. So there is a free speech protection within the bill, and that can be enforced. That can lead to fines and the same ramifications. There's also a proportionality clause. So if they take down far too much and they're overzealous, again, that can be enforced just with the same kind of teeth as the rest of the bill. And in addition, if they go beyond their terms and conditions or treat different sections of society differently, which before this bill they could do, then again, that can be enforced. So I think it's important to talk about what's actually in the bill, not what the headlines say.
I have to say,
there is free speech protections. So it was wrong to say that the Labour government doesn't believe in free speech, right?
You know what?
She just said there's free speech protections.
We're not going to get any agreement on this, I can see. And I have to say,
we wrote the bill.
Jim and Michelle, the amount you two have been shaking your head while listening to the other one, I think perhaps does perfectly illustrate the two sides of this debate. Thanks both very much indeed. Great to have you on. And good to get the opinion of you guys as well. Thanks to you, Vicky, too, as well. Well, I have to say, it has been a gorgeous day of celebration for the Lionesses after their Euros success. We had the open-top bus ride, we had a party at Buckingham Palace. But for the manager, Serena Wiegman, who we heard from on the show this time yesterday, and the kind of highlight for me, I have to say, probably a year-long highlight, it looked to be a surprise appearance from her favourite artist on stage. Obsessed with her. I'm obsessed with this woman.
I love it.
Those sort of nerves of steel.
Oh, yeah.
And today, to actually rap and that. The great Rigby just
and all
delivered.
Of the girls were recording her because they say like they've never seen her like that.
I love it.
She says how she watches them. She says, "Oh, they drink a lot." Do you know what I mean? So she watches them kind of drink and have fun, and there she was having fun herself. I loved it.
But you know what's really nice is the girls as role models, saying how proud they are to be English, quoting the Bible. It's a beautiful thing as a father of a young daughter to have those girls as our role models. I get goosebumps. I just think, how lucky are we?
I agree. And also, we grapple with Englishness and whether we can celebrate it, and we've got all this sort of stuff wrapped up in it. And actually, it's just this honest, genuine, patriotism.
And I think ultimately it shows that actually, when you come down to it, we don't really grapple with Englishness.
Yeah, it's true.
We're happy to celebrate English and enjoying ourselves and celebrating football. Yeah. Really, we are. Other people try to introduce something that says that we're not, but ultimately we love it.
I think that's absolutely right. Mickey, I love it. You came in here for your kind of tech chat and you've ended up on talking about Burna Boy with the Euros.
I mean, I spent my Sunday night doing karaoke after the Euros final. So
Did you actually? What was your song? Sweet Caroline?
No, I didn't. I for some reason did Tom Jones.
Oh really?
I thought there'd already been Sweet
Welsh,
Caroline.
though. I'm not sure.
Everyone was we'd already done all the classics, but the whole pub.
I thought you did England.
Exactly. Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah, it was incredible, and it is. I
Makes
agree
the
with
nation
the role.
smile.
Yeah,
right?
and I agree with the role model. Well, the only thing I think is that they wanted to have a bigger party. You know, the fans wanted to have a bigger party, so I think we need to have a bigger party. And it's really simple.
I'm all for that.
Yeah,
always up for the bigger
parties. Wembley.
Bank holiday, do you reckon?
Yeah, I think. Well, I'd say yes. We should have a bank holiday, and we should have a party in Wembley Stadium, Wembley Arena. They can all get together. We'll have a lovely party, celebrate English football, women bringing it home.
Keir
as always.
did last time round, push for it. This time round, as the next chancellor.
Yeah, what's your take? What would you say?
Having an eye on the balance sheet of the economy, I just think, let's celebrate, but let's not take a day away from work.
I love it. We're talking about... all right, bring the mood down. Like, me and Dawn are up. We talked about the role models for Englishness, but I also, for me, there is a big thing about women's sport as well. Yeah. And I just remember being a girl at school, and the sport available to us was just not that great, it's not the sport that we watched on TV was not the sport that we played at school. And for me, I just think it's great to see women, girls, playing things like football, which is like a national sport for us as well, right?
Well, I also think women's football was huge, and then basically they were told by the FA back then that they weren't allowed to play in certain pitches, and that's why there was a demise of women's football, because after the war, when all the men were out fighting, actually women's football was huge. So this is after the war, is it? Women's football was absolutely huge, and so this is going back to where women's football was. So just imagine if it wasn't interrupted, like a lot of things in society that gets interrupted by a certain group. Just imagine how great it would have been if it wasn't interrupted.
But you're seeing now much more investment going in.
Yeah.
Because of the popularity, because obviously of the characters and that whole sort of capturing the imagination of the nation.
Yeah.
I think Chelsea.
I mean, they need to be paid more. They need to be
invested more in the women's game, and I think they're looking at it as a sort of almost separate investment. And America, of course, is about to host the World Cup, and women's football in America is massive.
I think we're fighting for 2035 for the Women's World Cup to be in the UK.
Come on.
And I tell you something.
We deserve it.
I tell you something as well. The atmosphere, women's football is completely different.
Yeah.
Honestly, when you're sort of around Wembley, the atmosphere, the vibe, the family, the family vibe, it's completely different. And they don't fall over as much, do they?
I don't know.
It's true. We were tough.
How about you, football fan?
Yeah, I'm an Arsenal women's season ticket holder.
Here we go.
Absolutely love it. You're right about the atmosphere in the stadium. It's incredible.
Yeah.
There's so many little girls there in kit.
Yeah.
There's just families everywhere, women really getting into it. I absolutely love it.
And the guys love it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's not like, they
Great.
love it. They love not having to stereotype.
Thanks all very much indeed. Lovely to end on a bit of positivity, because there's a lot of gloom around. And talking about positivity, Sarah J. Mee, she's up next, and she was at that parade earlier. She got the ticket we all wanted at Sky News, so definitely worth sticking around for that one. That's coming up after this break.